There are some major questions about what the New York Rangers defense core is going to look like going forward, especially after this past trade deadline, as, of course, the Rangers ended up having a player that was heavily linked in trade talks, being Braden Schneider, and of course, he did not end up getting moved. On top of that, the Rangers have 5 defensemen that are right-handed on this roster currently, and on top of that, they, of course, have a bit of a question with the left side of this defense core going forward as well, behind a guy like Vladislav Gavrikov, as the team has some young options, but there are still some questions about how good they're going to be, of course, at the NHL level, and whether or not the Rangers want to enter possibly next season with one of their young prospects in a thoughtful role on the left side. So we're going to take a look and discuss what this New York Rangers defense core kind of looks like right now, what it could look like for the beginning of next season, and just really talk about the left and right side of this defense core as a whole, and just kind of see what this team could be looking like going forward. So let's just get right into it here, and we'll start off by talking about, of course, the top pair, which is, I think, locked in place for the foreseeable future. All the questions are behind the top 2 defensemen on this team, which are, of course, Vladislav Gavrikov and Adam Fox. Vladislav Gavrikov signed a pretty great team-friendly deal last offseason, of course, as a free agent, signing a 7-year deal with a $7 million cap hit. And for a true top-pairing caliber defenseman, I think that's a pretty good kind of team-friendly deal. So I think overall, he's been a great player, and Adam Fox and him together have been a pretty good top pair for this team for the most part this season. And even when Fox has been out, Vladislav Gavrikov has been incredible offensively and defensively. He's already got a career high in goals this year. He's been scoring at a pretty crazy rate. He's been great offensively, but also great defensively. Just an all-around really good defenseman. And I do really like what we've seen without Adam Fox in the lineup as well. He doesn't need a guy like Fox to be, a good top pairing caliber guy. Even without Fox, he has played some incredible hockey. So that's really nice to see there. The Rangers definitely do have a good kind of 1-2 punch. They're a good top pair, but behind them, there are definitely a lot of question marks with this team. And now let's start off here by talking about the left side of this defense core, and then we'll move on to the right side. But for the left side, the top options right now behind Vladislav Gavrikov are, of course, Drew Fortescue and Matthew Robertson. Another guy, of course, in the mix has been Urho Vakanainen, but I think at best he is definitely more of a kind of number 7 defenseman, probably an extra kind of D-man, which he can kind of fill that role fairly well, but ultimately I definitely don't think is ideally going to be in even a top 6 role for the Rangers heading into next season. So if he's an extra D-man, that's fine, but I don't really ideally want to see him actually in the lineup unless a bunch of injuries have happened, which of course would not be ideal. But I do think the Rangers, playing 2 of their young prospects, 2 of their younger players in Drew Fortescue and Matthew Robertson is very nice to see. We, of course, got to see Drew make his NHL debut a couple days ago, and he played pretty good there, moved the puck pretty well, hit a post, played some pretty good hockey, looked calm out there. I think looked like a pretty good, solid defenseman. I think, of course, this team going into next season are going to have to make a pretty big decision whether or not they want to have a guy like Matthew Robertson or possibly Drew Fortescue kind of solidified in a thoughtful role to begin next season. That's kind of the big question mark, I think, right now with the left side of this defense core. And I think ultimately what kind of path they want to choose is ultimately going to kind of decide what they do here, as if they want to really kind of fast track this sort of retool/rebuild and want to be really competitive for next season, then they're likely going to have to go out there and try and find a top 4 caliber D-man to be slotted into that second pair. But if they want to kind of take things a little slower possibly, which I would rather see probably, and maybe kind of give some more opportunities to some of the younger players and kind of see what they can do, then they could possibly just go into next season with Vladislav Gavrikov as the number 1 lefty, then a guy like Drew Fortescue or Matthew Robertson, of course, in that 2 and 3 spot, and then have a guy like Urho Vakanainen as that kind of extra defenseman, as a number 7 guy, and have a guy like Jackson Dorrington as the kind of call-up option, who's a young prospect in the AHL. So that could definitely be an option, but I think the main thing right now is kind of whether or not they really think Drew Fortescue is ready to be a full-time NHL defenseman. If that is the case, then absolutely you should run probably with a kind of 1-2-3 punch of Vladislav Gavrikov is the number 1 guy, and then have, Matthew Robertson and Drew Fortescue as number kind of 2 and 3 lefties, with, like I said, Urho as the kind of number 4, being number 7 defenseman. They're the extra kind of guy. That is an option, but if they don't think he's quite kind of fully ready, and maybe they'd rather see him start in the AHL, then you'll definitely need to go out there and go after another left-handed defenseman, as I don't think a guy like Urho Vakanainen should be a solidified kind of top 6 option for this team unless they're really looking to take things very slow. So I think right now the kind of big question with this this team is really what they think of a guy like Drew Fortescue, and on top of that, what do they want to do next season? Do they really want to compete for the playoffs there and try and go on a run, or do they want to take things a lot slower and look more towards the kind of longer term future and really kind of work on developing and giving chances to the young players, which I think is what they probably should do, but of course it's definitely not guaranteed to be what they do. So that's kind of the big question right now, but I do think going forward, a 1-2-3 punch of Vladislav Gavrikov, Drew Fortescue, and Matthew Robertson might not be all that bad, especially if this team is willing to be a little more patient and not really desperately looking to kind of push for a playoff spot and a playoff run right away next season. And I do want to give some praise to a guy like Matthew Robertson. I think he has played pretty good in a top 4 role this year when he's been relied upon to do so. Of course, when Carson Soucy was hurt earlier on this season and after he got traded, he definitely had a lot of top 4 kind of playing time, and he played pretty good there for the most part, being in a role that I don't think he maybe would have fully expected to be in, of course, possibly entering this season. So I think he definitely played pretty good and honestly is looking like a really good option going forward for this Rangers team. And now for the right side of this defense core, of course, we know the top guy who's going to be on the right side, and that is Adam Fox. But after him, there are definitely some major questions with what this team is going to look like, as currently they have 4 guys under contract that are seemingly about NHL ready at least. You have guys like Braden Schneider and Will Borgen, who are, of course, solidified NHLers, but you also have guys like Vince Naiorio and a guy like Scott Morrow, who are definitely still in the mix as well, who, are looking to kind of be full-time NHLers, but of course can't quite get that spot because of this kind of logjam this team has right now on the right side of this defense core, because you got that top spot locked up there, but after that, there are definitely some kind of spots open, and we don't really know what the pathway going forward is going to be, as you picked up a guy like Vince Naiorio off waivers, who's been an all-right option so far for this team. He's still pretty young though as well, former second-round pick. You've got a prospect like Scott Morrow, who of course was acquired in that Keandre Miller trade and, has played decent at moments in the NHL and AHL, but hasn't really been incredible yet and hasn't kind of really shown a ton of flash. And then on top of that, you have some kind of solidified NHLers in Will Borgen and Braden Schneider, but a guy like Schneider needs a new deal this offseason, and on top of that, he was pretty heavily linked in kind of trade talks before this deadline, so maybe things kind of heat back up this offseason. Maybe we do see a trade happen, and on top of that, Will Borgen did just recently sign a new extension last regular season, of course, after he was traded from the Kraken over to the Rangers, and still has 4 more years left with a cap hit of $4.1 million, which I don't think is a bad cap hit at all for what can be a second pairing caliber defenseman. Now, I'm not saying Will Borgen is an incredible player, but for a $4.1 million cap hit, I don't think that's bad at all. He is a capable second pairing guy, I think, on a cup winning team, a real competitive team. Ideally, yeah, he's probably not in your top 4 maybe, but I would say at worst is a pretty great number 5 option on a team. So I think going forward, there are definitely some questions. What does this team want to do with guys like Braden Schneider, Will Borgen, Vince Naiorio, and Scott Morrow? And unfortunately, I can't really answer that. I have no idea what the plan is actually going to be. If they trade Braden Schneider, then of course that's going to open up a spot in the top 4 pretty easily for a guy like Will Borgen, leaving a spot on the third pair open for a guy like Vince Naiorio or possibly Scott Morrow. But if you keep a guy like Braden Schneider and re-sign him, well, then you'll likely be looking to kind of move one of Iorio or Morrow, because there would be no clear spot open on the right side of this defense core at the NHL level, and you'd have, of course, 5 about NHL ready righties under contract. So that's kind of the big question right now with this team. What do they want to do with a guy like Braden Schneider? Do they want to trade him or re-sign him? I think that's going to be a big deciding factor on what this kind of defense core is going to look like next season. They want to run things back with the pretty much same 3 righties, being Foxy, Borgen, and Schneider. Do they want to shake things up there and move on from Schneider, which I do kind of feel like could be what's best. I don't think he's played the greatest hockey this year. I don't think he's kind of taken a step up in his development over the last kind of, 2, 3, 4 years now, it feels like. So at this point, cashing in on him and getting some pretty high value for him, I think could be the right option. Kind of the same thing the Rangers did with Keandre Miller, where if we waited any longer, his value would probably just continue to drop off even more, and I don't think he would have ever really possibly maybe taken that step up like we've, of course, seen him do this year with the Canes if he were to stay with the Rangers. So maybe it is the better thing to kind of move on from him now, while his value is still pretty high in this, free agent class is going to be so bad. Teams are going to be, maybe getting a little desperate possibly, so his value could be in a pretty great spot to cash in on him now. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching today's video. If you have enjoyed, definitely don't forget to click that like and subscribe button for daily New York Rangers content as I do post a video about the New York Rangers every single day at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And also, definitely don't forget to comment down below your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts on the New York Rangers and their defense core going forward? What do you want to see happen with the left side? What do you want to see happen with the right side there? Do you want to see a guy like Braden Schneider get re-signed or traded? Let me know your thoughts. I'll catch you next one, and bye.